What are your rights if you are wrongly accused of a crime? In light of so much that's now going on around us, you must listen to my two guests, a man who was wrongly accused of murder and his attorney, both of whom founded an organization after the attorney successfully represented the accused. How are you affected by the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, and the Sixth Amendment? In a nutshell, the Fourth Amendment protects you from unlawful searches. Under the Fifth Amendment, you have the right to remain silent. The Sixth Amendment is the right to have an attorney to represent you. Let me welcome Nick Hillary, an athlete and coach who was wrongly accused of murdering a child and has since been acquitted, and his attorney, Mani Tafari. Welcome to Brooklyn 45.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Nick, I'm going to begin with you. I'm sure all of our viewers want to hear your story. So very briefly, tell us your story.
So my story began in 2011 when I was working as a collegiate coach in upstate New York. I was wrongfully accused of murdering a 12-year-old boy. I was dating his mom at the time. And as a result of that accusation, my life became topsy-turvy, inside out. And for 6 years, I fought the judicial system, trying to win my freedom, get my story out there. And so as a result of that journey, that has brought me to this point in which now I am more advocating for others who might find themselves in a very similar position.
Okay, let me still step back with you. You were accused. Did you feel that you had rights? And what was the accusation specifically? And what was the approach to you?
So basically, yes, I knew I had rights. And I think a lot of us know that we do. What I also knew was having knowledge of that right also provide me the knowledge that those rights were being violated. And when those rights were being violated, as I've always shared with others, maintain respect with law enforcement, make a mental note, and when the time is right, with counsel's advice, you take the necessary steps.
And with counsel's advice, your counsel, of course, is Mani Tafari. Welcome to Brooklyn 45 again. Tell me about how you got involved in representing Nick.
Indeed. Well, Nick and I have a long personal relationship. We now work for Queens Defenders, which is an organization that helps people, indigent clients who can't afford lawyers, and we provide them with that Sixth Amendment right to counsel. So our story goes back a couple of decades. And when Nick first called me and informed me that he was basically being framed for the murder of a child, immediately we went into action. And what we used was a knowledge of the Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendment. Specifically, Mr. Hillary, even though he was held at a police station for over 8 or 9 hours, he maintained his right to remain silent. So he refused to speak with them, and he asked them on tape, on video, he invoked his Sixth Amendment right, which was the right to counsel. And normally, people don't learn these rights or really dig deep into these rights until they're sitting at Rikers Island in a law library. Fortunately, Mr. Hillary was educated from a good school, very good friends with an attorney who does this for a living, and we were able to use those 3 amendments to save his life, and we want to use those same 3 to save the life of many others.
Nick, you were very fortunate to have this very good friend. Were you childhood friends?
We're both Brooklyn boys. So I graduated from Canarsie High School in Brooklyn. Mr. Hillary went to Tilden High School. And then we went on to college and won an NCAA championship. So the bond is very deep. And Brooklyn's really in the house. And that's why, even though we work for the Queens Defenders who represent clients in Queens, we were overjoyed to be here with you tonight as well.
Well, we're going to talk about those Queens Defenders in a little while. But you started talking about the Sixth Amendment. I want either of you or both of you, let's inform our listeners about those three amendments that you said are very important: the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, and the Sixth Amendment. Let's jump to the Fourth Amendment.
Yeah, well, so all those amendments are contained within the Bill of Rights, which are the first 10 amendments. These were all codified and signed back in 1791. Now, as all your listeners who are very educated and your viewers know, Black people were unfortunately enslaved in this country up to 1865. But the Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendment were invented by the founders of this country because King George III had his knee on the necks of the Americans, the white Americans. And they understood that they needed these amendments when they formed their country to protect them from government, because government can be very powerful. Unless citizens have these rights, you can get crushed. So to your question, what the Fourth Amendment is, it's the right against unreasonable search. So everyone has the right against unreasonable search. And the way Mr. Hillary and I put it, it's a very easy thing. It's, I will not consent to a search today. I have nothing to say. My attorney's on the way. And that very nice jingle contains the Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendment. So I will not consent to a search today includes the Fourth Amendment, your right against unlawful search. And again, I will not consent to a search today means today, tomorrow, that's your jingle. It's always today. And you should not be consenting to a search, which is what Mr. Hillary did. So again, it's not do as I say, is do as I did, and that's what maintained my freedom as it relates to the Fourth Amendment. Okay.
Let's talk about the Fifth Amendment.
Oh, so,
again, go ahead, Mr. Hillary.
So the Fifth Amendment, the right to remain silent, which, I've always talked about the importance of being silent when you know you're supposed to be silent. Whenever you are stopped or arrested by the police, they would read you your Miranda rights. And within that paragraph, it says, you have the right to remain silent. But because the First Amendment is one of the most well-known amendment and one of the most promoted amendment, most people believe the First Amendment means the right to talk. And so knowing that you don't have to say anything to law enforcement, especially if you don't have your attorney present, the Fifth Amendment is what protects you from having to say anything to law enforcement. And that's why in that jingle, I have nothing to say really embodied all about what the Fifth Amendment stands for.
What is the one thing that you must remember if you're stopped by the police? Because so many people are stopped by the police on occasion.
But yeah, so many people are, and so many Black people and young Black people. And the main thing to remember is to maintain that respectful communication. Always maintain respect, but never cooperate. Because understand that there are many Black men who started their journey as witnesses and then became defendants and later convicted felons. So it's no need to cooperate, but you first have to respect that police officer, because approaching him with respect, he's automatically going to think, hey, perhaps this kid is an attorney's son or a congressman's son. He's not yelling and screaming at me. He might know his rights. So you basically disarm a police officer. You disarm the scenario when you approach with that respect. So it's always respect, but never cooperate.
So let's get back to the Sixth Amendment, which you talked about earlier, and the need or the importance of having an attorney. Nick was very fortunate. He knew you. He was able to call you. But what do you say to people about that importance of knowing an attorney or being able to contact an attorney?
Well, you need to know, number one, you have an attorney. There's some great organizations here like the Legal Aid Society. There's Brooklyn Defenders in Brooklyn and the organization that we're a part of, who are the Queens Defenders. So you have a right to an attorney, whether you can afford one or not. And as I'd stated earlier, these amendments were made back in 1791. It wasn't until 1961 and the 1963 case of Gideon v. Wainwright, when it was a poor indigent defendant, Mr. Gideon, who had to write to the Supreme Court. And that's when they figured out, hey, the Constitution means everyone should have an attorney. So what we're saying is that know these rights, know that you should have an attorney, because it wasn't an attorney who gave you these rights. It was a regular person, Mr. Gideon. So we need to save ourselves. Gone are the days when we can rely on having a great DA or great police officers. We need to know these rights so we can be our own advocates. Before the lawyer gets here, know that you have a lawyer. And if you're secure in the knowledge that you will get a lawyer, you'll be calmer. You won't speak. You'll understand that you can wait for your lawyer because you will have one.
You have referred to the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, and the Sixth Amendment as a bulletproof vest. Explain that.
Well, it is really a protection. And what you have to see, we use the old African proverb where the bird says, when men learn how to shoot and not miss, he learned how to fly without resting on trees. And we've seen stop and frisk operate for 20 straight years. That's 2 decades, one whole generation in New York. And what we needed and what we still need is a program to explain to people that this is your bulletproof vest, because you are, as a young Black male, a lot of times hunted in this society. And it's a very unfortunate thing to say, but over a dozen years in the legal system, Mr. Hillary has just around the same. We know that young Black males are not given the benefit of the doubt. They're targeted by police. So the bulletproof vest, it might not totally protect you, but knowing these rights and having a bulletproof vest, your chance of survival in this very cruel judicial world is much more improved. So to me, it is really a bulletproof vest, and it is about survival.
Most importantly, this bulletproof vest, the concept itself, for us, is preventing things from happening. Too often in our society, we try to spend a lot on the cure. But I think if we start to invest a little bit more in the prevention, then we don't need to spend a great deal on the cure. So that's the next most important thing of the bulletproof vest in regards to the 456.
You guys talked about education, the importance of knowing what your rights are. And your organization, Justice 456, is doing that. Tell us about your organization.
Well, through the Queens Defenders, what we are doing, and there's a Justice Center also in Queens, and what we're doing is similar to your interest in young people and high school, middle school students. We understand that to go to the core and to help this generation more than anything, because you can teach an old dog new tricks, but it's much harder. We want to get to these young people, and we want to spend about 45 minutes with them. And what Queens Defenders will do, we're going to provide meals. We're going to provide a safe place to come and to learn these rights, because 1 hour with Mr. Hillary saying to these kids, I am that example, right? So you can look at me and say, the reason I'm not in jail now is because I know these rights. I want to impart this knowledge to you, because there's a gap between the private bar and the public bar, and the people need the education, and the young kids need the education. And that's where we're going to stand in.
We don't have a Justice 456, as far as I know, in Brooklyn. You guys are Brooklyn guys. How do we get one in Brooklyn?
I like that question. Well, as you know, 456, the amendment, is not concentrated to any one area. It actually is applicable to all 50 states. So for us coming to Brooklyn tonight through the Brooklyn 45 is our first step in introducing Justice 456 to everyone in Brooklyn. And we look forward to coming into the schools as well as the other organizations that we have on the agenda to speak to share this information.
And as Nick and I had said before, they asked the old bank robber, why does he rob the banks? He said, that's where the money is. And wherever the oppressed people are, wherever the youth are, whether it be homeless shelters, courtrooms, community centers, projects, we're comfortable in all of these environments. So we are willing to come, we are willing to go. And the Queens Defenders are backing us 100% in spreading this very important message.
We began this program by talking about the criminal trial of an innocent black man in an upstate New York white community. You don't see anything like that happening here in Queens or Brooklyn or New York City, do you?
Well, we see it happening everywhere. I mean, you only need to go back to the Central Park Five. You need to go to Bill Cosby recently. And what we are saying is that when you go to the heart of all these issues, the 4, 5, and 6 are always at the center. Now, we've spoken a lot today about 4, 5, 6. The 7th Amendment is the right to a jury trial, and the 8th Amendment is the right against cruel and unusual punishment. Now, why would a brand new country have 5 of the top 10 amendments dedicated to criminal defendants? Again, I come back to the point that I made. It's because they understand how powerful the government is, and any faction that is ever targeted can be destroyed. So having these amendments since 1791, now is the time to let people understand it in very simple terms, not complicated terms. Mr. Hillary and I see ourselves as constitutional translators more than anything else. And that's what we're here to do.
Many people say that the criminal justice system is broken. I'd like you to respond to that.
I think it's doing exactly what it was meant to do. Many people became woke with George Floyd, but we've been woke since George Stinney. And when you know that story, you understand that the criminal justice system way back in the 1940s, was executing a young black 13-year-old for killing 2 white ladies with no evidence. And it comes all the way through. You have the Scottsboro boys, they were railroaded while they were on a railroad. So this is nothing new. And this is not just happening in upstate New York. This was just one blatant time when they got caught with their pants down. So that's why we want to spread the message that this happens in Brooklyn. You guys more than anyone know. We had a great DA in Brooklyn that tried to clean up a lot of what needed to be cleaned up. And that's what we want to try to continue as best as we can.
You talked earlier about the Miranda rights. Explain the Miranda rights.
Well, basically, these are the rights that when someone is arrested, you have certain constitutional rights, including the right to remain silent. And that's what Nick Hillary was speaking of earlier. And the police officers say this to you. There's basically a formulaic. If you watch Law and Order, you'll hear it. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say and do can be used against you. Normally, when you're in that situation, you don't even remember your mother's name, because you have a grown man either slapping handcuffs on you or putting you in a little room. So that's not the time to hear the Miranda rights, even though it's well-intentioned. The time to hear the Miranda rights is when you're speaking with an attorney and an experienced educator who's been through it, after eating a nice meal and hearing that these are the things you need to know. So we're trying to Mirandize our youth before they get into handcuffs.
Nick, have you gotten over your experience of being falsely accused and going through the terror that you went through? Have you gotten over that?
No. And it's one of the reasons why I'm sitting here talking to you today, because in order to get over it, I have to share my experience. I don't think that will ever stop, because the moment that I believe I am over it, it's the moment that this kind of behavior will get funneled back to the back burner and the objective and the goal is lost. So as long as I continue to remember what has happened to me, it will continue to fuel me to continue to share and educate everyone who will benefit from Justice 456.
Let's talk about the importance of sports. You were a soccer coach?
Yes.
Okay, tell us about soccer then and soccer now in Brooklyn. I'm sure you know what's going on in Brooklyn. I'm sure you know what's going on in Japan. But let's talk about the importance of these sports in schools.
Oh, most definitely. Sports in school is probably one of the most important activities. Personally, for me, like I've always said, especially as a coach at the collegiate level and the high school level, that's one faculty member that an athlete will spend 4 years in constant contact with, building some of the most invaluable relationships for years to come. Oftentimes, a player will leave an institution and you will ask, what's the name of your math teacher? What's the name of your English teacher? What's the name of your soccer coach? Because they have spent so much time together and they learn so many life lessons being a part of a team. You know, teamwork, commitment, dedication, sacrifice, hard work, you know, working for one common goal. Sports is such an intricate part of every different level, even more so in our school system for the young kids.
Sorry, Mani.
Yes, I.
You were shaking your head just now, and when you began this program, you talked about some of the trophies that you have around you.
Well, we were fortunate to win a national championship in college together, but the brotherhood that we formed is even more important. And those lessons that Mr. Hillary was speaking about, that never giving up, that never giving in, that always believing that you'll win. Believe it or not, it comes into play when you're fighting for your life in the criminal justice system. So I think sports in schools and trying to get a lot of these young kids involved in soccer, especially without having to pay a ton of money, is extremely important as well.
Very economical, yes.
What would you say is the value of the educational program that your organization, Justice 456, is lending to the knowledge of our young people?
Oh, yeah.
It'll save your life. It'll save your life. And I mean that in the very truest of terms. Because when you go to jail for 25 years, you don't come out the same person you go in as. And there's a truth that we may know as educated Black men, and like I said, every Black man over the age of 40 can write a book about injustice. But it's very, very, very important to know these rights, because if you don't know these rights, you're walking around in the Wild West without a bulletproof vest, and I don't think that's a smart thing to do.
I mean, these rights are also the foundation for you as a young Black man or brown man within these inner cities to see as a guardrail to guide you beyond your early years. You know, I remember as a teenage growing up, they always says if you're a young Black man and you get to the age of 21, it's an accomplishment. That shouldn't be the case. And so, you know, sharing these kind of information with young brown men and Black men in our communities is for them to know it's their right and they could exercise it, and they should do so when needed and when necessary. And it makes a big difference.
Do the cops see you as a threat? What is your relationship with the cops?
I would hope it's good, because these police officers have family members too. And these police officers need to know the 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendment, because not everyone does. And if they don't know it, they're more likely to violate it. So we're here to teach everybody. Nick and I understand that skin color and eye color have the same significance, but we are not naive enough to believe that every single police officer or every single prosecutor believes that as well, which is why we want to give you, the people, you, the youth, the knowledge to protect your own self without having to rely on the goodness of someone who may not have your best interest at heart.
In addition, it is important for everyone to know that Justice 456 is not an anti-law platform. That's not what it is. I think anyone who is in law enforcement who have full understanding about knowing their rights, I think cops themselves will embrace it because it makes their life as well that much easier. I mean, we have gone to body cams. We could have implemented these long time ago before body cams. Body cams now just becomes an addition to knowing your rights as a citizen.
Justice 456 began with a relationship between you two guys, a relationship that continued, especially when you had a problem, Nick, where you were arrested, falsely arrested. And now it has come to the point where you are teaching young people how they should avoid situations that may land them in situations that you are in. However, if they do get there, they need to have the education. So as we wrap up, we've got less than a minute to go. Let me give you guys a final word on what do you see as the important takeaway point of 456, and you've got 15 seconds each.
So just to 456, the takeaway, as an educational specialist at Queen's Defenders, working with youths every day who are in infraction with the law, sometimes that's the first place of contact, but it's not the last. And I hope that sharing it with them and sharing it with others similar to them, and they sharing it, it becomes a network and a legacy that they will use to their benefit going forward.
Okay, Mani, I think Nick took up your time, but we're going to wrap up with you.
That's totally fine. Well, all I will say is remember that Black people are great people, are historic people. We've just had a couple of bad centuries. We built pyramids.
Yes, we did.
Yes.
Mani Tafari and Nick Hillary from the organization 456, Justice 456. And the stories that you have told, the experiences that you have shared are very important to our Black people, as you said, and people who are of no particular hue. And we thank you for being our guest here on Brooklyn 45.
God bless, Professor. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Brooklyn 45 is a 501c3 not-for-profit, and we welcome your support. Check out our website, brooklyn45.com, and feel free to donate or share it with your friends and family. Have any comments or questions? Send them to our Facebook, facebook.com/brooklyn45tv. If you have any questions or topics you think we should cover next, shoot me an email over at brooklyn45tv@gmail.com. Thank you again for watching.